Welcome everybody to Microsoft 365 Platform Community Call. It is November 1st, 2022. And as I was just about to say before doing the intros, today we'll probably have a bit less attendees because this is one of those strange weeks of the year where the timings between the US and Europe and the rest of the world are a bit mess. So Europe moved already to winter time last Sunday, and then this means that today this call is 1 hour earlier than normal, which might be confusing some of the calendars. But let's not worry about that one. The call is getting recorded. People can access the recording afterwards as well. And that's the beauty of getting all of this available in YouTube. Now, today we'll have a really cool set of 3 demos coming up from Waldeck, DC, and Hugo. We'll start by having a quick update on the Microsoft 365 platform, so all of the assets which are available for you to get started, some of the latest news or all of the latest news because it wasn't a super busy week this week, and then we'll do a group photo all together for those who are willing to put the video on, and then we'll move to the actual demos of today. So we'll get to the demos roughly 10 past and then 15 minutes per demo going through the different areas. Now, quick recap on the assets which we have available. We do have 2 different YouTube channels available, one dedicated for Microsoft 365 development, one more for the community YouTube channels and non-development videos as well. Both of them are great channels. It's a historical reasons why we have both of them. Subscribe to both of the channels to stay up to date on what's happening. We have a lot of open source assets available from multiple different organizations. And to be able to access those samples which are available, we have a lot of cool sample galleries, which will make it easy for you to find the relevant sample for you. And if you're wondering that there's too many URLs to remember, luckily there's only one, which is AKMS M365 community, from where you'll find all of the different links and assets available for you to get started. Now, we do have quite a few developer community calls. We have this one, which is happening weekly on every single Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific time, which is really targeted for Microsoft employees to share the latest and greatest around the different features and capabilities which are available. On top of that, we have 4 different monthly community calls, which are the Adaptive Guard, Microsoft Identity Platform, Office Settings, and Power Platform community calls happening once a month. And then we have the Thursday series, which happens 7 a.m. Pacific time, and a word of a warning on that one as well for this week because of the summertime, wintertime adjustments between US and Europe and the rest of the world. This call this week, the Viva Connection and SharePoint Framework call, is 1 hour earlier for Europeans. US-based people will not realize any difference because, again, the time has not been adjusted for them. And the week after this, it's all again in a normal, in quotes, time zones and time sequences. It's a bit of a strange thing that the world changes to wintertime and summertime in a different sections, and it makes things interesting, let's put it this way. Now, as you're getting started on Microsoft 365 development, we have 2 different really awesome assets. So please subscribe to the Microsoft 365 developer program. It's the easiest way to get started. You'll get a free E5 developer tenant, and as long as you use it for development purposes, you will get renewed automatically. So that is getting, it's a free environment where you can test out how to do development for all of the different capabilities within Microsoft 365. And how would you know what you can do? Well, we have a lot of training materials available from the Microsoft Learn. So AKMS M365 Dev and Learn is the location where you can find a tremendous amount of different training modules, which you can follow up on based on your interest. We also have 2 different podcasts available. So we have the Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast available, hosted by Jeremy Fake and Paul Shuffling from Adin 365. And then we have the PMP Weekly, where we always cover the latest news. And we have a visitors on that one as well, hosted by me and the Waldeck Mastercards, happening every single week. That's kind of the name of the PMP Weekly. We also have a lot of samples available. We already passed 1,400 samples. We're catching up on a lot of the pull requests, which were submitted, a lot of activities happening in GitHub. So most likely we'll get past 1,500 samples quite soon. The easiest way to find the relevant sample for you is to go to AKMS M365 samples. And we have actually a new version of that service available, which was released last week. So it's much more faster. There's a much better filtering mechanism and a much better way of actually finding the relevant sample for you. So please do give us feedback related on how that one is working for you. As you then find the relevant sample for you, you might be wondering on how would I get started using that? Luckily, we got you covered with our Sharing is Caring initiative, and David can do a quick intro on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vesa. As Vesa had mentioned, there are a ton of samples available to you and a ton of opportunities for you to contribute, but that landscape may look a little scary to you if it's new to you. Well, Sharing is Caring is a program that provides live, hands-on, in-person, virtual opportunities for you to contribute. We'll walk you through it along with you in a safe space, not recorded opportunity where you can ask any and all questions you want. We're getting new dates back up. We just scheduled the Power Platform Samples contributor. We're going to be scheduling writing for the web using PNP SPFX samples with NVM. It's all free, safe space opportunities. All you need to do is register aka.ms/sharing is caring. We want you to get involved and empower you to do so. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent. So let's go through some of the updates and news for this week. Not a massive amount of news. Again, we're 2 weeks after the Ignite, so that is as expected. But we do have always something new happening. So first of all, we have the great, awesome announcement from earlier today from the SharePoint team, which is announcing the new SharePoint Pages API in the Microsoft Graph. And this is by DC, who's the PM of that feature, is actually in this call, and it's going to cover that within 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So really, really cool to see the Graph APIs for modern SharePoint pages. The other news from last week was an updated preview on the SharePoint Framework 1.16. And as part of this preview, you are able to start extending SharePoint Framework solutions also for Outlook and Office.com. So some of the announcements which we've done already in Ignite. Right now, we're looking into having a release candidate for 1.16 SharePoint Framework this week. And then a few weeks from now, there's going to be a GA on the 1.16, which is really, really cool. So awesome new features available. And then Tomomi Imura, she's a cloud advocate for Microsoft 365, also had a great blog post on roll a dice, building a command bot for Microsoft Teams using Teams Toolkit with Visual Studio Code. A bit older video, but a great blog post on summarizing on how would you actually build those kind of experiences using the Microsoft Teams Toolkit. There was also a update on the Microsoft Teams blog related on what's new in the Microsoft Teams. These are super cool monthly summaries on what's happening all up within the Microsoft Teams. There's a similar kind of always happening for SharePoint and OneDrive. So you want to probably check those out as well. And then there is an update related on Microsoft Viva topics at KM World in November 7th to 10th of 2022. And that is a specific knowledge management conference where obviously Microsoft Viva is a big part of. Now, before we go to the actual stars of the day with the cool demos, let's do a quick group photo in the Microsoft Teams Together mode so we can actually capture that. For those who are willing, you can enable the video and we'll pop in the screen. 1 second, I will get you on the screen in a second. Here we go. I'm not recording it. Let's wait for a while to get a few more people in the house. We do have a decent number of attendees, so people were able to realize that the schedule is a bit adjusted for this week. I see a lot of US-based people, a lot of European people actually on the call as well. A lot of familiar faces and slowly waving hands. Thank you, Mark, showing the example, and Chris on the front row. Now, let me actually put the recording on, and let's grab a nice GIF animation out of this. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Let's wave some hands. We'll share the GIF animation after the call as well. Thank you, everybody. Once again, really awesome to have you on the call. And please keep the feedback coming in the chat and in other channels. Awesome. Really, really cool. Thank you for that. Now, and without the further ado, we'll go to the actual stars of today, who are Waldeck Mastercards, DC Bador, and Hugo Bernier. So Waldeck's going to first start by having a topic on defined meeting times with multiple people in Microsoft 365. This is about Microsoft Graph, isn't it?
Some say it is.
Some say
we'll
it is.
know in 5 minutes. Let me start with sharing my screen and asking you the most important question of the next 15 minutes. Can you see my screen?
All good. We got a pretty clean. I like the simplicity of this application. This is really cool.
It's less is more, right? So yes. In the next few minutes, I'd like to walk you through a scenario that we hear a lot about in case when people build apps for work, right? So apps for work are apps that you build for work. These are the apps that help you manage projects, orders, anything you might need in the context of your work. And one case that we have is, well, imagine that you manage a project, and on the project, there is a project team. And maybe you need to plan a meeting with them to get a status update, do a review, sign up for something, whatever. Well, typically the way you would go about it is that in one app that manages the project, you would have the project info, the info about the team, people, and then you would do what? You would go to another app, you would go to Outlook, start the process of creating a meeting, adding attendees, finding a meeting time, and whatnot, right? Why couldn't you have the ability to do that already within your app? Because in there, you already have info about who is on the team. And these are your colleagues. So why not be able to create a meeting with them immediately from the app? So what you see on the screen is a simplified experience of something that you could integrate in your work app that allows you to do exactly that. That gives you the ability to tap into data and insights that you have already stored on Microsoft 365 from within the work app, and basically tie these two into one so that users can stay in the context of their work, right? So in this case, because I don't have the work app, let me pick a few people on my team, right? So we will pick 3 folks. And then let's say that we want to find a spot for 4 of us, so 3 of them and me, which is here included in this app. We want to find a meeting spot for 25 minutes in the coming days. And at this time, we are calling into the Microsoft Graph. We're asking Graph, like, hey, is there a time for us to meet? And apparently, we have 3 options. Like, we have 1 today, and there are 2 tomorrow. So let's pick one of them. And let's say we want to do a project review, and we want to meet in room A, schedule a meeting, and it's done. So it's really simplistic, and it's kind of the same experience as you would have in Outlook, but it's not in Outlook. And the power of that is, again, you can keep people in the context of their work. They don't need to have 2 apps open, getting attendees from one app, getting them into Outlook, finding the meeting there, confirming things. No, you can do all of that from within the same app for work that you already use for other things. So, like, this looks great. The next part is, how does it work? Let's have a look at some code, right? So here, I have basically a single page app that I built without any JavaScript framework, like no React, no Angular. It's just vanilla JavaScript, right? And I have 2 files that are really the core of the app. First one is this thing here, which defines the ID of my Azure AD app that is backed, or that backs this app. And I put it separately because imagine that you work with other devs on your team and you don't want to be in each other's way because maybe you're experimenting with things. Maybe somebody works on a different part of the app and they want to be able to try things out, right? And maybe you work with your own tenants. So everybody wants to be able to bring their own AAD app. Now imagine that I would put this GUID into my app. Every single time I commit this file to Git, right? It would be a change, and then I would overwrite everybody else's. So by keeping this separate, I am not in other people's way, right? So this is a good tip for you to keep in mind when you work with other devs on your team. Now, another part is, right? So this is built, we already talked about that this is built using Microsoft Graph, right? It uses Microsoft Graph to tap into data and insights from Microsoft 365. But there's also one more thing that we use. We use the Microsoft Graph Toolkit for this part here, to be able to invite attendees, because otherwise I would need to build this UI to let me call out to Graph, download people, download their pictures, build some kind of input box. Why? I can bring this in with the single line of HTML here. This one line gives me the ability to find people in my org and pick them, select them, and whatnot, right? So this is really easy way for you to build apps that are connected to Graph. This one line is all you need to have this experience here. And of course, because we're building an app that is tied to Microsoft 365, we need to do auth, right? And we probably know next to time zones and regex, there is auth. It's tough. It's hard. It's complicated. There are different flows, 20 million things you have to know about. It's tough. And the other cool thing is, if you use Microsoft Graph Toolkit, what is it that you need to implement auth in your app? Well, first thing, you need to bring in Microsoft Graph Toolkit, right? Like you need to download it to your app. 2, you need to add a login button, right? So basically, this is the control here that allows users to sign into your app. This is literally the single line. And then 3, you have to tell MGT, as it's called for short, right? How do you want to authenticate to your app? And let me find the right person, the right piece of the code. It's here, right? So in here, I'm saying that I want MGT to use MSAL2, right? So MSAL being the auth library that we offer for at Microsoft for auth, right? And we wanted to use the AAD app that I had. I want the app to ask the user to give me access to users, people, so that I can search for other folks. I need also access to calendar so that I can find the times on which we can meet. And then I also want to be able to create an event, because at the end of the day, we want to be able to create the meeting, right? So these are the things that I asked up front, and this is literally all I have to do, nothing more. So this part here, and then all the way up, a login, and I'm good to go. I don't need to worry about which flow to use, where to store the token, how to refresh it. MGT takes care of all of that for me, allowing me basically to focus on building my app. So the cool thing is, right, we've seen I can log into my app, the most important part. I can pick attendees, people from my work already. The next part is, how do I get the meeting times at which we could meet? Well, my first idea when I built this app was, well, so do I need to get like his calendar and and then his, and then find meeting spots, take into account time zones, and iterate through all that? Well, that's an option for sure, but there's a way easier way. It turns out that in Microsoft Graph, we have this API named Find Meeting Times, and it is here. So just by calling this one API and passing in people with whom I want to meet and saying for how long I want to meet, right? So do I want to meet for 25 minutes, 55 minutes, hour, passing that as an option, as well as few other things, I will get back meeting times, right? So Graph is doing the heavy work for me, taking into account time zones, already existing meetings, and so forth and so on. And I get back all this info directly, right? The way it works, let's have a quick look at the network tab, and let's do another request so that we can see it. What is it that we get back? Let's zoom in into that. So this is the data that I get from Graph. I get like, okay, who is available? Well, everybody is free. I picked 3 folks, including me. We are all free. The confidence is 100, meaning everybody will be able to join. You can also say to Graph, hey, let this meeting go through if at least 3 out of 4 folks will be able to join. And then you will get some additional things about the start, the end time, time zones, all of that. So all of that info is already available, as well as some additional info that explains why Microsoft Graph picked this particular spot. Well, because it's one of the nearest time when everybody is available. So cool, right? We get all these insights for free, right? And then once we have this, what is another step that we have left? Well, we pick a time, we add subject and location, and create a meeting. And the way that works, we call another API from the Microsoft Graph, events, right? So 2 events we post again, subject, the meeting start and end, which we get from the previous call. We picked our attendees that we get from MGT, right, the picker, and then we basically submit that to Microsoft Graph, and with that create event. Now, the cool thing is, right, if you know a little bit about MGT, MGT gives me the ability to add this picker to my app, but it doesn't have anything for me that would allow me to find the meeting times or create a meeting. So how do I go about it, right? Because like I have one way to authenticate with MGT to my app, but how come that I can then call Graph? Well, the cool thing is that MGT internally uses the Graph JavaScript SDK. And the cool thing is that it not only uses it internally, but it also exposes it so that I can use it in my code too. So let me show you on the Find Meeting Times here. Let me see. So here I have Graph Client, and I think I get it. I set it somewhere here, right? So here, what I do in this app is I keep track when user signs into my app, right? So I keep track when the state will change. What I want to do is I want to see, hey, if the user authenticates, I want to take take a reference to the graph client, which is the graph JavaScript SDK, and I want to store it in a variable that I can then use across my app for calling graph. And the cool thing is, this is basically the fully fledged graph JavaScript SDK with all abilities, the middleware, the handling of errors, throttling, and all that it has already in it, and it's already pre-authenticated. So I don't need to worry about auth at all. I can just call graph directly, and that's exactly what I do here, right? So here, when people sign into this app, I take a reference to graph, and basically from that point on, I can call any API on the Microsoft Graph, assuming that I have access to it, right? So here I got access. I requested a few scopes, and that gives me access to some APIs on Microsoft Graph, which I then can use to find the meeting times and create a meeting. So this is a really simple yet a powerful thing that you can really easily build with the Microsoft Graph Toolkit and Microsoft JavaScript SDK, something that you would reasonably want to integrate in your work app. So with that, let me catch up with you with, is there anything that you ask on the chat, and maybe Vesa can be my lovely assistant and see if there is anything that I should reply to or respond, if there's anything that folks ask that I should respond to live.
There was a few follow-up questions, nothing too specific. How does the app handle external users or domains? Would that actually work? That's a good question.
It doesn't at all, because it doesn't have access to their calendars, right?
Yep.
So right now, this would be for internal meetings only.
Yep. And of course, Find Time is the one application which would work with externals. But this particular thing is a great example on internal meetings setting up inside of the company. But other than that, there was a good amount of discussions. But I guess it's better to actually give DC the stage, and we can follow up some of the questions if you check those in the chat, and we can get back on the questions if we didn't answer something before that. But DC, let's jump on your side and talk about the new SharePoint Pages Microsoft Graph API.
All right. Thank you very much, Vesa. Thank you all for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are from. I'm going to share my screen. I'm here with my awesome team, Han Bing and Ning, and we are here to talk about the SharePoint Pages API. The modern SharePoint Pages have been very instrumental in the growth of modern SharePoint experiences and portals in the UX. So we've been fielding asks for having a decent API, Graph API endpoint, and it's come to fruition right now. And we're super excited to, for the first time ever, have a demo of this functioning API. We just published a blog post that announced this of the functionality in the API. We're hoping to roll out the beta by end of November. And then this fall, you'll see a few recorded demo videos coming hot straight from my Han Bing developers dev box. And this is just proof of all the concepts that we are able to show today. So quick review, it's a new Graph API to get, create, and manage SharePoint pages and news posts. It's going to replace the existing beta API, if some of you might be familiar with that. Since that beta has been very old, we have a newer data model behind the new API, which will be rolling out to GA. And there'll be it'll break the existing API experience. But we hope to keep improving on the new API, and we have a rich, exciting roadmap for these features. What's in scope? You can get a page, you can get a list of pages, you can create a page or a news post, you can delete a page, and these are all of the core operations, the CRUD operations that will be available in beta by end of November. Just to call out before you all ask, what's not in scope is editing an existing page, which is the tactical adding a web part or adding a section to a specific part of a page. That's not supported. News link creation is supported. Of course, there might be a few more things that are not supported, but these are the obvious things that we've already fielded as questions, so we just want to call it out. And now we go into our demo time. So the scenario here is Han Bing, my developer, is running the code on her dev box and working on a local dev box tenant. The scenario is around first getting the page content of a specific page. Let's listen.
First, let's scroll down the page on the right side to have an overview. When you want to fetch page data, you can call a get method on this endpoint, which would return information of a SharePoint page. Great. Let's expand it to have a better look. Here is the page name, the thumbnail image, the page title, training and resources. I'd like to call out the page layout property, which is an article here. But if this page is a home page, it should be a home string. Additionally, there is a property called promotion kind. Here the page is a normal page, but when the page is a news post, the value here could be news post. Scrolling down, we can see the created and updated information. What's more, we can also see the publishing state. We also have a property called title area, refers to the data in title region. In order to access page data content, we can add a query called expanded canvas layout and call this endpoint. The page content storage in a property called canvas layout. Here we get it. However, the window is too small for us to take a look. Let's full screen this tab. Okay, great. There are two properties nested in the canvas layout. One is horizontal sections, the other is vertical section. Let's take a look into the vertical section first. Vertical section refers to the vertical section on the right of the page. You can see there are a list of the parts. The first one is a countdown timer, as you can see here. The second one is an event web part, while the third one and also the last one is a Twitter web part. Let's back to the page. Yeah, we can see here the first one is countdown timer, second one events, and the last one Twitter web parts. I'd like to call out there are an additional property called emphasis on the vertical section, which refers to the background of this section. Similar. The data structure in horizontal sections are pretty similar. Therefore, with this API, it's easy for us to get page content from any SharePoint pages.
All right, that was the first demo showing how you can get the page content given a specific page.
The second demo is about copying a page. On the right side is the target page we want to copy. Call a get method on this endpoint, which will return information of this page, including page content and page metadata. Here we get the response. Expand it to have a better view. Check the title and name to confirm this is our target page. Instead of going through all of the nested data, you can simply copy the whole data and paste it as a payload of request. When you want to create a new page, call post method on /pages endpoint. Don't forget to rename the page. Here, I would rename it as about us-2. Wait for a few seconds. Great, the page is successfully created. Let's see how the page looks like. I will drag this tab to the left of the window. Lovely. So here are the two pages. The left one is the one we just created using the API, and the right one is the original one. Scroll down to have a comparison. We can see the two pages' content are exactly the same. With this feature, it's easy to create a new page with only a few API calls. The most straightforward way is to start from an existing page. Maybe you noticed that there is a Post News button on the right top of the page. That's because this page is a news post, but it isn't published yet. Back to the home page, the news web part now only has the About Us page, but the page we just created using the Pages API is not there. To make this page public, you can simply call the publish endpoint with the post method. Back to the page and refresh it. We can now see on the top of the page the status is posted. Refresh the home page. Our new news post should be also shown up in the news web part.
That was the scenario of creating a page where you initially have the basic page created on the web. You get the page and then make modifications to the page in terms of title and text content. You recreate the page. You can also publish the page as a news post and see that news post roll up in the news website. So the last demo is a scenario of maintenance where you get the list of pages and delete.
Here's a demo about deleting page from a site. First, I'm gonna cut this endpoint to list all pages on the site. From the right side, we can see there are 6 pages. The default returning structure has too many properties, which are not clear for us to find some information. Therefore, I'm going to add a query to select only the name and ID from the result. Let me type it. Add a query to select ID and name. Here we get it. We can find the page named About Us -2. This is the page I created in the last scenario. So I'm gonna copy the page ID and paste here, and I will use a delete method on this page to delete it. And wait for a few seconds. Great, we have a status code 204. And let's refresh the page to see, great, the page is gone.
So those were the 3 quick demos to talk about the scenarios that we are supporting. We'd love to hear from you all about what other scenarios you have in mind, in bringing together the various basic CRUD operations. As we talked about in the demo, the ideal creation flow is to make a page and use it as a base to make copies of the page. Another scenario is where you get the list of pages and you can programmatically have a governance situation where based on one of the metadata, you can filter out the pages and delete them or archive them in a different way. So those are some of the scenarios we're imagining. Would love to hear from you as well. As I mentioned, beta release is end of November. We'd love to have you all sign up for the beta release testing. Of course, beta is open to everyone, but once you sign up on the farm, I'm going to paste the link in the chat window here. It'd be great to have a one-on-one interaction. And the AKMS Pages API is a quick short link to the blog post and a place to constantly keep track of what features are being rolled out in our Pages API. That's it from me today. I haven't kept up with the API conversations. Anything else, Vesa, that you want me to address?
Yeah, before we go forward, I think it's good to elaborate that because there was a discussion related on what is the objective to replace the BMP Pages API, which is widely being used by this work, and is this going to support all of those different scenarios? And do you want me to answer or do you want to answer? Either way.
You know enough. You should go. Your voice is more clairvoyant than mine.
Thank you, DC. So there's a lot of learnings on the BMP Pages API, which has existed for a while, and now we're adapting a lot of those learnings directly to provide the Microsoft Graph Pages API. Ultimately, objective is to support all of the different same scenarios as we support natively within a UX or within the BMP Pages API within a Graph API. Now, let's face it, this will be a journey. The beta version will not be as fully complete and with all of the features as we have within the Pages BMP API side, as this is rolling out to beta. But based on the feedback, based on the input, we'll add new capabilities within a Graph API for sure. Ultimate objective, however, just to repeat, is to make sure that the Graph API for SharePoint Pages is the API which has all of the needed capabilities, and you don't need to use anything else. Good way of saying that, DC?
Absolutely. I was glad to hear it in your words.
Thanks, DC. I didn't want to promise anything from your side on this,
no.
But
yes,
that's good.
Yes. Yeah, definitely a journey. We're committing to a V1.0 rollout very soon, and we'll keep constantly iterating on the API and get to parity and even more.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, DC, on that one. Now, good thing is we're a bit ahead of the schedule, which is great. Better to stop a few minutes early than a few minutes late, which is awesome. Hugo, you are next in line on the series related on Power Pages.
And we all know it's always a good thing to have extra time when I'm presenting.
I didn't say that. So,
All right, let me share my screen.
where was I? Oh, there's one more thing. Oh, this. Cool. We can see the screen.
No.
Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Hugo Bernier. I'm a principal program manager in the Dynamics 365 and Power Platform Community Success team. And today I'm excited to talk about a different type of pages, which is Power Pages. And Power Pages, if you are wondering, hey, what's this thing? Well, it's the latest family member in the Power Platform family. And the Power Platform, obviously, you got the ability to create workflows, to create apps, to create dashboards and virtual agents. But with Power Pages, you are now able to create externally connected websites that are really like data-centric. They're really intended to be connecting to your Dataverse infrastructure, the rich Dataverse infrastructure you already have. And then because it is part of the Power Platform family, it's designed to really work with, again, Power Automate and all these cool things. Now, it's important to from the start, to talk about Power Pages is really intended for the Fusion teams to work together. Right, so we're talking about the makers, the traditional developers, and the IT professionals to work together to create websites, again, that are connected, because we want to make sure that, our sites, because they're externally available, we want to make sure they are compliant with the organization's standards, the branding standards, the accessibility standards, all these good standards. We want to make sure that they are secure. And we want to make sure that, again, we're all working together. We're not just allowing just any random person in the organization to create websites. And again, in future demos, I'll show you how we have the ability to control these things so that we are not just allowing any person to create any websites randomly. There is a process to make these websites available. But let's actually show you an example here. So in the past, I've talked about how we can use the editing functionality of the pages. So I'm not going to do that too much today. I'll focus on how to change the styles of your pages and the elements of your pages. And usually when I do these demos, I always look for a free design template and I try to emulate it. If I was doing this for real, I'd probably find a template that has the colors close to my corporate brand and I would start with it. But today I'm going to use this free theme from ThemeWagon as my inspiration. It has some bold colors. It's got a nice hero image. So I'm going to use that. So when I'm on the page, I can edit every element on the page by just selecting it and clicking on the ribbon that appears there. So for example, if I want to change the background, you can see I can just mouse over the background here and I'll see what the background looks like. But in my particular sample, I know that the background for this section is actually using an image. So I could upload an image, but in this case, I just want to use the image URL. So I'll go paste the URL here, and right away I have kind of the look that I'm looking for. I'll just delete the video here, and because I want everything to be aligned to the first left half of the screen in this design, I'll just kind of keep the two-column layout here that I have. I'll just keep the right column blank. All right, so now I'm starting to have the style I'm looking for, but I want this section to be a bit bigger. So again, if I go to the settings of this section, you'll see that I can pick different styles, pixels, percent, and so on and so forth. In this case, I know exactly the height that I want. I want it to be 580 pixels high as per my design. So it's looking good, right? And if I move to the next section here, I want to change the color of the spacer. And if I, again, do the same thing, I edit the background. I'll, as I mouse over the screen, the colors again, I'll see the colors. And you can see I can add extra colors here. So if I wanted to pick a color that I really want, I could add it here. But, I kind of want to make sure that I'm using a theme so that I have this color consistently across my entire site. So let's go explore where these colors are coming from. So if I go to the styling workspace, we'll actually see that there's a whole bunch of themes that are in there, right? And I can select different themes, and you can see as I select the themes, I can see the preview. Some of them look good, some of them don't look so good. Depends on, again, what my design looks like. But every theme has its own color palette, and I can adjust these color palettes by just going to the color. So here I'll just reuse the original color. I can go pick a color, and here I can enter. I could pick the sliders. I could pick the color from the palette itself. I could pick the transparency if I wanted to, or in my case, because I'm copying and pasting from a theme that already exists, I'll just paste the color here and I'll drop it in. Now the cool thing about that is when I do that, again, I can see right away where it impacts on the page. And I could continue doing that with other colors. So let's do that. I'll just go pick some different colors. I'll just go pick the gray here, which is the main color. I'll put that in there. Cool. And then, one of the things that it's important to note is that Power Pages doesn't really tell you, this color is used here, this color is used here. You kind of have to explore a little bit to do that. And that's what I tend to do, is I'll kind of explore the colors, try to find where these colors are applied, and then use these colors consistently. All right, so there's not an awful lot of yellow on the page, so I can imagine that the color for the button, the call to action button here, is going to be the one. So I changed that to the orange. And yeah, I can see the orange button is looking good. We'll have to figure out why that gray color is coming from in the text very shortly. But, again, you can see I can just click through and create the color themes that I want. So I fast forwarded a little bit here where I've preset all the colors and then that I wanted from the theme, and then I added more colors. Now, why would I want to spend time setting my theme, my color palette? It's because the idea of Power Pages, obviously, is to create these data-connected, rich websites. We want our makers to be able to go create pages, to drop data, tables, forms, and things like that, without really worrying about the CSS and JavaScript and the HTML. So these colors can be preset, and I'll show you later how I can even upload these colors as a CSS, and then use these colors consistently throughout the site. All right, so the dark text on the orange here is kind of annoying me a little bit. So if I go to the styling palette, I can see that, let's see. So I got all my different styles here, and you'll see the button here, the primary button, is actually using kind of a filled orange and an Arial font, but the color of the text is actually gray. So I'll set that to white. And you'll notice that I can also change the hover style and then the fill color when I mouse over. And because I don't want gray over gray here, I'll change the font color for when I mouse over the button to be white. Right? And I could continue doing this with all the other button styles in the page. But this is cool because now consistently all my buttons will actually have that theme that I'm looking for. All right, so let's save this, right? We should probably save this. Now I could have discarded all my changes, and that's one of the things that I like to do when I first start, is I like to explore through these colors, try to figure out which colors are used where in what templates, and then save it as I'm, as I make the changes, or discard completely. And I'll show you how we can even reset the style sheets a bit later. All right, so now I want my header 2 styles to be changed a little bit. So you'll see that I can make it bold or semi-bold. In this case, I'll make it bold. And I want, because my sample theme uses 30, and I'll pick a darker gray. And you can see now on the right side immediately when I make these changes, right? It starts applying. Let's continue a little bit here. So you see if I explore a little bit through the page, right? I'm seeing the styles, but I want my sections to actually be a bit wider, a bit higher, because that's what the template does. It adds a lot of vertical spaces on my template. So let's go to the section and look at the margin and spacing. And then here I have 60 pixels by default. Again, I could pick different measures or units. I still want pixels here, and I'll set it to be 90. So again, right away I see my sections are wider or taller, and that's cool. Okay, so let's move a little bit forward here. So I'll set up my heading 1. Okay, so the heading 1, the problem with the template that I picked, the sample theme that I picked, is it's using a different font and a different size. And honestly, let's remember that this interface is really intended for the makers, to give them as much power as possible without overcomplicating things. So if I look at the options here, you'll see that my options are somewhat limited, right? I only have a selection of fonts. Come on, yep, here's my fonts here. I have a selection of weights and selection of sizes, but it's pretty limited in terms of the options I want to give my makers, and that's by design. Again, same thing if you go to SharePoint and the page editor, right? You start with some predefined colors, predefined styles, and the whole point of this is consistency, right? Because think about it, your website that you're creating here is going to be available externally by your partners, your customers, your constituents. You want to continue enforcing your brand identity. But, unlike the rest of the Power Platform, the one thing that I like about Power Pages is that, the rest of the Power Platform, when you reach the limits of what you can do with Power Apps or Power Automate, you're kind of stuck, right? You have to live within that bubble of what the product gives you. But with Power Pages, once you reach the limits of what it can do with the user interface, you still have access to HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So this would be more a scenario that a maker, maybe, a developer would maybe want to go edit some styles. And so let's go take a look. Let's go on the page again. And this is the heading that I want to change. But here on the upper right corner, I have the ability to edit code. And if you remember in Power Apps portals, we used to have a little pane that would open in the bottom. And I used the term lightly here. You could edit stuff, but it was not always the most enjoyable experience. Here, we have the ability to go directly in Visual Studio Code and edit the content of every page. And you can see I have the CSS, the JavaScript, and the HTML. So that's all the HTML that's on the page is actually here. And if I wanted to edit the HTML, I could do that. I'm not going to do that in this case, but see how it's using the theme colors right here. So it's not hard coding the colors, it's actually using the theme colors. And here I see that the create an engaging headline is actually a heading 1. So I can actually go create a CSS that imports the font that I want for heading 1 and sets the styles for heading 1. So let's do that. I'm going to go copy and paste here because watching me type this would be very painful. Let's see. So I'll paste the import. And again, I'm using the add import to import a custom font. The majority of websites out there use custom fonts. It's really easy to import custom fonts, and Power Pages supports it. But again, we don't want just the makers to randomly start creating custom fonts. We want to make sure that we enforce that corporate identity. So this font here would be my corporate font that I want to use. And then what I'll do is I'll paste also H1 style, and I'll overwrite the font size, the weight, and the margins, and things like that. Now, when I go back to the editor, I can just click on Sync. And what it will do is it will basically tell it, hey, someone's changed the code behind the scenes. Go update it. And then if I go preview the page, so click on Preview, click on Desktop, what we should see, well, it's already done it, but right away, it's actually changed the style of my heading. And just to prove that this is a real thing, if I go change here this word to be bold and go save that and preview that, we should see that the heading has changed styles. All right, there you go. Okay, so far I've been able to go from a maker experience to picking palettes and things like that to going into the CSS for that page. But what if I want to customize more? Well, for example, the navigation here is kind of ugly, right? One of the things that we've noticed is when I was playing with the colors, I introduced some gray navigation elements. And, well, okay, I can just go to the styling and I can just click around with the colors. I happen to know that this is the same color here, so I can just overwrite this color, right? So I'll just set that to white and it should make my navigation nice and pretty. But here's the problem. When I do that, yes, it does fix my navigation, but it also fixes or breaks a lot of things. All my text in the page is actually broken. So one of the things we have to be careful about when we're playing with these colors is we really have to make sure we understand the relationship between the color palettes and the brand colors with the elements in the page. But in this case, I want to actually apply some font styles. I want to apply some hover effects, and I want to make sure that this is done consistently across my entire site, not just on a page-by-page basis. So let's go back to Visual Studio. Let's go back to editing the code, and let's just test new HTML here, or new CSS, sorry. So what I'll do here is I'll copy and paste my CSS I've created. Ignore the stuff that's at the bottom. I inserted some code to break some looks that I'll fix in later sessions. But here, if I sync, I've actually changed the, you should be able to see, I've changed the navigation color, I've changed the navigation font, I've changed the hover effects, all that stuff. Let's move forward a little bit. I'm not going to wait for this to refresh. Okay, but the problem here is what I'm just doing now is I'm actually changing every single page. I don't want that to be on every single page. I want those styles to be applied across the board on the entire site. Well, if I go back to my styling, you'll see that I have in the hidden menu option against my theme, I have the ability to manage custom CSS. And you'll see there's already 3 CSS that are applied, but I also have the ability to upload my own custom CSS here. So what I'll do is I'll go find a CSS that maybe a developer has written for me, the Contoso style, or maybe the brand police in my organization has already created this CSS for me, because this is a Bootstrap site, so we can use Bootstrap style sheets. And if I go back to the site, now I am applying the brand colors that I've applied. I'm applying kind of the styles for Power Pages, and I've applied my custom CSS in that order, and then I'm applying the themes on top of it. Now I can go back to my custom CSS for the page. I don't need that anymore because I'm applying these CSS to the every single page in the site. And let's see if it comes back. It should come back. So now the other thing that I can do when so if I preview this, just to show you, this is starting to look like the site that I want to, right? We have pretty site, we have the pretty sections, and the headings all done, and the buttons are having the style and the color and mouse over effect that I want. This is great. But what if I want to do some other stuff with my style sheets? So the one thing that I can do, if I go back to my style, my global styles that I've now uploaded, and I manage my custom styles right here through that hidden button, I could just, again, reset everything to default if I messed it up, but I don't tend to avoid messing it up. So if I go to my custom CSS, I could also upload more than one custom CSS. And the cool thing about that is if I had more styles, or I had a style specifically for, I want buttons to behave a certain way, I like to have individual CSS that have these styles, so I can pick and choose kind of a la carte menu of styles in my demo. All right, so we'll skip ahead while it's uploading. So now I have kind of my 2 CSS that have applied, and I can just change the order because they get applied in the sequence that you see them, right? So I can put the more CSS first, or I can move it down. I can enable it or disable it if I wanted to, or I can actually go edit that custom CSS directly in Visual Studio Code. Again, that whole experience of being able to edit things like CSS and HTML and things like that directly in Visual Studio Code without really kind of having to open a different application, but doing it all from within the browser. That's kind of really powerful. All right, so this is my page. Let's just kind of move forward here. One of the things that I can do, everything I've learned here today, is all available. If I go back to the home and I go to the Learn section, you'll notice that there's sections about design and build. Well, today we were actually using the Design Studio. We were creating themes and this one. And we were also using Visual Studio Code and Power Pages to actually edit the stuff. In future sessions, I'm going to show you how we can actually go in and change the structure of the page, create some page layouts and things like that. And then we're going to do some fancy forms and lists. But that's for another call. And that's it for me for today. Back to you, Vesa.
That was a teaser for the future sessions. Thank you on that one. So it's going to be awesome. Right. Not yet. Not yet.
You have no choice to bring me back.
Yes, we'll need to get you back. I think we have still at least two series spots on the series already scheduled for those who are interested on this one. But we'll have other sessions, of course, here as well. But it's good to have kind of this series of things and showing. And every single week we'll have repeats on some of the topics as well. Well, not on the topics, but on the products and services. But anyway, thank you, Waldek, on showing the Microsoft Graph and Microsoft Graph Toolkit integration related on finding meeting times for multiple people in Microsoft 365. Thank you, DC and the team, showing really the awesome work and progress related on building those having that Microsoft SharePoint pages, Microsoft Graph API in place. And thank you, Hugo, for the updated styling guidance for Power Pages, and looking forward on the next sections and next demos on that series as well. Now, the recording of this call will be available within 24 hours within our Microsoft 365 community YouTube channel. You cannot access the call directly from the chat. It doesn't matter if you're requesting permission. I cannot give you the permissions. We always get those requests after every single call, and that's why we're always repeating this in here. But the recording will be available there. Subscribe to the channel. You'll know immediately when the recording is available, or follow us on the Twitter, and that's the easiest way to know when something is happening as well. We do tweet quite a lot of interesting material on a daily basis on Microsoft 365 Dev or M365 PMP. The next Microsoft 365 platform call is happening on November 8th, 8 a.m. Pacific time. If you're based in Europe, US is moving to winter time on next Sunday, which means that this call is happening in quotes in a normal time frame. This week was the weird one where the call is happening in kind of hour before if you're based in Europe or not in US. US people, of course, it wasn't visible for you. But thank you, everybody, for joining. All available community calls are from AKMS M365 calls, and that's it for today. Thank you, everybody, for the great demos. Thank you for the really interactive chat. Stay safe, and we'll be back within next week. Cheers. Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.